an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Immortal Great Souls Book 1, Bastion, chapters 38 through 41. In these chapters, our girl Imogen got here a lot faster than I was expecting. I thought this was gonna, be somewhere more towards the end of the book, and we're halfway, and here she is. And it feels like Bad News Bears, man. She knew Scorio? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Dan for commissioning this episode. Dan is here in the chat again. Appreciate you always being here, Dan. I want to mention two things off the top that may affect the episode. One is that there is currently a thunderstorm, and you may hear thunder. I also might lose power because it happens distressingly often, but I am on a backup, so hopefully that won't interrupt everything. Secondly, I have a really, I don't know if it's an infection or what, in my jaw from a crown that I got put on a couple weeks ago. And the dentist can't see me till next week. So I am on a kind of hardcore painkiller that Owen had left over from a procedure. And it has made me a teeny bit loopy. I didn't expect it, but the pain was really bad. So I took it, and I'm feeling a little bit more from it than I ever expected. So that said, apologies if this episode kind of feels like it's unfocused and all over the place. That will be why. That said, these chapters are probably okay for that to happen because it is very chaotic. There's really a lot of fighting that I'm going to describe so that we can get an idea of like what higher levels are able to achieve with magic. But a lot of it doesn't really, I don't need to go beat by beat because all you need to know is they did this and it did nothing and she shrugged it off. And they did this and that also did nothing and she shrugged it off, because that's pretty much how it goes. Is like their best case scenario is we will just like annoy her, which, the fact that they're just all like, yeah, all right, let's go to our deaths to annoy somebody is wild. But there it is. Okay. 38. Scorio is waiting for his friends. It is turning to first rust. With a breath, Scorio inhaled coal mana into his heart, rose and leaped into the air, igniting as he dropped the 10 or so yards to land before them with a crunch. A basket balanced neatly on one upturned palm, the other lowering to the ground to steady himself as he rose to his feet. What is being said here is superhero landing. That's 100% the superhero landing, right? And I really enjoy that there is a feeling of sort of uncertainty for a moment on how not just he will receive them, but on how they will receive him. Because they didn't part on awesome vibes last time. I won't say that they were at odds exactly, because they really weren't, but in Scorio's mind they kind of were, and it took him some time to understand that, and I could see meeting with him again being like, I really hope he's not still pissed or hasn't kept going without us after all and had things happen to his brain. So he has gotten those buns, and it's mentioned that he used the last of the money that Leonis got him to buy them, which, after having said, Leonis, where's the money though, last time, I felt completely satisfied by that. I really appreciate that this author seemed to sort of anticipate me being like, hold on now. So they're eating and talking over what's going on, and there is I was really surprised by this. He explains about the pills and the way that he has been farming these flowers. And Lianchi says they're going to be rated bronze level? Can we have some? No kidding. Leonis rubbed at his bearded chin thoughtfully. We could help you create more of these farms and then begin selling them to our classmates in exchange for other treasures and elixirs. I didn't think that what he was doing was outpacing what they were doing. I thought that they were getting such consistent pills and elixirs that this was only going to enable him to just about keep up. And maybe it is, but because they're so much higher powered than whatever these two have been getting. So it's still quite valuable for them, you know? But I just didn't expect this reaction. I thought that they were just going to be like, oh, nice. Yeah, that'll probably do something for you. But the fact that they also wanted in and that they were talking about selling them, I was kind of like, word? Maybe this is something, Scorio. Like, look, Scorio has different concerns than just trying to make money. Clearly that is not important to him at all. But you gotta eat though. You know? You gotta, it'd be nice if you could afford like a house to live in with protection from the elements and creatures. You're in a place that's, you know, better in terms of that than a lot of other spots in the ruins, but you know, it's in the ruins. So I feel like you could do a little bit better. At this point, though, he wants to stay in the ruins. Like, let's be real. I think what I would love is, and I know that's not really seeming like the way magic works in this world, but who knows? I really still don't know enough to tell. But it would be cool if he could, like, rebuild within the ruins something specific for himself that's, like, custom, you know? Dan is in the chat saying, this is when I realized the series was going to be something special. Every book has 2 or 3 sequences in them that would normally be the climax of other books, and then they just keep going. That's wild. That's very interesting to hear. Okay. So, second surprise. Naomi is here. I thought that she was going to, like, be at the ruins when they got there, but she came and is meeting them here. And I love the whole way this goes, guys, because she is so on guard, clearly. But I think that it's really saying something, how much she has grown to trust and like Scorio, that she is willing to meet his friends because if they are his friends, she's likely to think better of them. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like she's allowing them in a way because she trusts his judgment, and that's a big vote of confidence. So the whole way that she meets them, I love the way that this is described. You hear that, Lianchi? Scorio's got an apothecary. Leonis grinned. Looks like he's doing all right for himself out here. A new voice spoke out from above them. He's not failing abysmally. I'll give him that. The 3 of them looked up to see Naomi crouched on the sill of a second-story window. At first glance, she seemed calm, but not only had her voice sounded artificially light, she was breathing shallowly, her chest rising quickly, her knuckles white where she gripped the sill's edge. And this is so awkward. I really loved it. I really, really loved it. Look. Just because you have an awkward first meeting does not mean that you're not going to wind up being friends. But sometimes it'd be painful, you know? And maybe that's because both parties are as awkward as each other, which is what will ultimately unite them. But it is a hurdle that they have to get over first. So there's a moment where Leonis just is like, thank you for helping Scorio. He needs all the help he can get. And it's clear that she's like keeping herself from saying something snotty about him, but she doesn't. And it seems like in the absence of saying something snotty, she really just doesn't know what to say. So she doesn't say anything. And there's this like long silence. And finally Scorio's to be like, would that I could be saved, but if anyone can pull it off, it's Naomi. Did I ever tell you two how we first met? And this was just delightful. You guys, he basically like writes a little short romance story. And he talks about how he's an expert at playing the oud, and that he would play this song every night called the Char's Lament. And I thought I was all alone until I heard the sweetest voice singing the words from the opposite rooftop. Leona's solemn expression began to crack as he realized what was going on. And Scorio glanced up where Naomi was glaring at him. She knew the words, and each night she would sing them with perfect clarity, but I never saw her until... And she stops him, and he says, but I haven't gotten to the part where I was attacked by basilisk operatives, and you recognized me by the sound of my music. And she's just like, oh my God, I'm going to fucking kill you. This was just so delightful, you guys. I really appreciate the reminders that Scorio has a good sense of humor when he isn't being psychotic. I just need that. Because he can be so very serious about things, you know, and he is silly. He can be very silly, and I really let it be overshadowed by the fact that he is so power hungry. So anyway, I just loved that moment very, very much. And after she says, I'm going to kill you, Leonis is like, okay, now I know you're friends. So Naomi gives him the liquid, and she says, as promised, take only a teaspoon. Will you be joining us today, Mistress Naomi? I had some errands to run. She agreed to escort us to the base of the academy, and depending on how long it takes us to get there, she might have time for one run of the gauntlet, maybe. Right? Right. Yes, I can escort you all there to, keep you safe. Having an Emberling with us will make all the difference. Thank you kindly, Mistress. Naomi, no need for anything else, just Naomi is fine. Naomi, then, may I ask you some questions as we walk? And they get into a whole, like, lovely conversation, and it seems like she's actually starting to relax a little bit. And they run into our friend the Toad. I am in love with this fucking animal. Can I just tell you guys? This is a real weak spot for me, as I'm sure it is for many, many people. You introduce a, like, kind of used to be a threat or a bully and now is sort of like cowed character that is an animal. And I am putty in your hands. This is something that happens in like One Piece. Occasionally the giant bully animal will be actually killed, and I hate it. I really, really hate it. But every now and then the animal sort of like, I don't like to say like turns its cloak, because how much does an animal actually have the like specific alliances? But in One Piece, you'd be surprised. Animals seem to really know who's on their side. But in this case, the Toad, friends, it croaked, favorite friends, pass. A trick? Leonis, sotto voce. Don't think so, said Scorio. Friends, he called out. Favorite friends, repeated the Toad, its voice warbling nervously. Then it slipped back out of view. I'm not sure I believe him, said Naomi as they circled out wide to avoid the ruined house, nobody taking their eyes off its darkened interior. I absolutely cannot wait. I need for this Toad to become a genuine, like, bud of the crew. I do not think that it's likely to be possible in reality because of the fact that the toad needs to be in like these mana rich, like dunking itself, basically. It feels pretty tied to a location. So I just up front, I understand my hopes here are very, very thin. However, I just would love it so much if they had a giant toad as part of their gang. How fantastic. And he's got like a pretty intimidating ability. And I don't know, like, for all I know, the toad can talk. Like, maybe it can develop in other ways as well. Guys, I know this isn't anything, but I love him so much. I think he at this point deserves like a name. And I'm going to think on that for a little bit and just kind of, I think I said Eugene though. Didn't I say Eugene at one point? Who did I name Eugene? I feel like that was something. Anyway. So they go through into, and there is like a brief description of them actually getting to the edges of the ruins. And then Dan says it was Eugene that I picked for the toad. Oh, Eugene. Yes. Okay, good. I'm going to try and remember. But this is when they spot the shadow. Is that Cole Mana? Asked Lianshi, stepping up alongside him. No, said Naomi. I mean, I don't think so. Fiends? Is Bastion under attack? Could be. And they watch and watch. Now, guys, I'm going to be honest. I would have run a lot sooner than them. This is how I feel all the time, indicating I am a coward. I'm fine with that. But this also, like recently I was watching the Hunger Games movie, the second one, to cover with Rashawn. And there's a point where there is a fog coming toward her. And she like waits for it to reach her and reaches out to touch it. And I was just like, the minute I saw that fog, I'd be out of there. It'd be over. Like, so this is sort of similar because the mana coming in feels like a fog. And that's why it was on my mind. They watched as an ocean of shadows slowly flooded into Bastion, causing the far end of the sunwire to dim, entering an artificial first rust, then darker yet to first clay, then its very terminus disappearing altogether. Should we get back to the academy? Asked Lianshi, glancing at Naomi. It doesn't look like it, but it's coming in fast, said Scorio. But it's not filling the whole city, said Leona. See, it's moving through the air, but not smothering everything. Like ink dropped into water, the darkness unfurled into countless gyres, its pushing edge thin and ethereal, its heart impenetrable. But it wasn't flooding out to press against the buildings that encircled the sunwire. Instead, it projected ever farther into the sky, spearing out alongside and around the sunwire, enveloping it in places and in others furling around it. Look, whispered Naomi. In the center, do you see that? Scorio squinted, sharpening his dark vision, but it didn't help against the cloud's darkness. For a long moment they simply stared, straining. And then he saw. Looks like a woman? Who? Leonis cleared his throat. Who could do something like that? Nobody I've ever heard of, said Naomi, taking a step back. Maybe a charnel duke? A crimson earl? I've no idea. I've never seen anything like it. The figure was drawing ever closer. And we get the description of Imogen, which it's so interesting how he mentions with a couple different women, specifically the freckles on their faces. And I don't know why, but that is a really great way to make somebody go from feeling like a complete alien to human. Just that adding that little detail, even though he did it twice, and I have a tendency when things are done that close together of that nature, feeling a bit of a way about it, it was really remarkable how much it snapped me out of seeing her as a cartoon character and making her into more of a person. And I don't know, there was just something, I was startled by how effective that was, because it's a really simple thing, but there it is. So they decide that they need to get the fuck out of the open, and they are going into the academy. But she is coming in right behind them. And when he, like, turns and looks out over the sky toward her as she's coming toward them, she just looks right at him. Like, almost full eye contact, I think. For a moment, he could only stand there, a heavy weight crushing his heartbeat slowing, turning sluggish, his breath catching in his throat. He stared at the woman, her gaze searing into his even at this distance, her beauty perilous, her hair and form looking to be half shadow. Her face was narrow, her cheekbones raw and prominent, eyes ringed with darkness under arched brows. Her lips were full, painted a deep burgundy, but her skin was pallid to the point of looking unwell, the smattering of freckles across the bridge of her nose and cheeks standing out starkly against her waxen skin. But her eyes, they seized his attention and gripped him tight, held him against his will, drained him of thought, of motive power. He felt like a rat frozen before a serpent, cold spreading through his body, unable to do anything but watch her draw ever closer, her gown fluttering, her hair melding with her cloak and the greater darkness. And all of a sudden, he gets yanked back, and it is Leonis just pulling him out of eye contact, which manages to kind of snap him out of it. The whole moment there, he realizes as he's like turning and running, he was holding his breath. And I really like that detail. This sort of like the pressure of a greater will is also reminding me of Cradle, of course, this like description. But the stopping of breath is a particular detail that I like, that I don't remember from those. And I felt like it reminded me of moments in nightmares, you know, when you're like trying to scream, or if you have like sleep apnea, sometimes you will dream that you're like choking and wake yourself up. So anyway, he is just like, what the fuck? What is she? Why is she here? And, this is when they begin to realize that, like, she's kind of following the same path as them, but they aren't what she's focusing on, because she's going past them. And eventually, Scorio says, what if we hide in the gauntlet, wait this out in there? And that is what they decide to do later, but they don't get a chance here. Not a bad idea, said Naomi, though if she wrecks this place, we could be trapped for eternity. Or till we die and return to the Archspire, said Leonis, moving out wide, palm ghosting over the surface of each bier he passed as he frowned up at the huge dome overhead. Return to that thing? Naomi pointed to the collapsed Archspire. Good luck. You feel that? Something's imminent. Leonshi's voice was a whisper. Then the base of the dome, high above them, began to warp. Scorio had half expected windows to burst in, for huge blocks of stone to be demolished and sent falling to the ground below. But what happened was far, far stranger. And this was definitely giving me like Doctor Strange vibes a little bit. Just the fact that it's almost like it's circulating through all of the potential possibilities of what this architecture could have been. The inner curve of the dome began to move as if it were coming alive, blocks protruding and shifting around, delicate arches emerging, then splitting off to brace against the lower segments of wall, ornamental windows and inverted stairways blossoming into existence as a hole to the sky outside opened, at first just the size of a fist, then quickly expanding, the dome retreating from that point, restructuring itself till at last a portal stood in the heart of a profusion of mad architecture. I thought that sounded so cool. I really like the idea of it being something that she just like redesigns rather than it being a destruction outright. And it being something that she redesigns, but we can see that the design doesn't even really make sense. It could be because she's mad and she has just kind of lost the thread and doesn't, doesn't like have the presence of mind to make it make sense. It could be because she doesn't care if it makes sense. It could be she doesn't even have that much control over what it turns into, and it just sort of manifests, and her aim is just to create the whole, so she doesn't care or notice or have control. Who knows? But I just thought it was a really interesting method of just busting a hole in the ceiling. So she goes over to the archspire and says, "Is this what called me here?" And she looks really disappointed. I can't tell if this is what called her here. It feels like it is. It feels like if it were like Scorio, she would have a different reaction to him than she has later on. But I do agree later on when they talk about whether what they were doing is what brought her here. And Scorio is like, it is a coincidence. We didn't do anything. I can't help but feel like you don't know enough to say that for sure. And I don't blame him for just outright denying it to these people. That's the right call. But we're in his head, and it does feel like he doesn't believe that they have done anything. And I've got to assume, and this is something that's I'm absolutely uncertain in this. You guys know how much I have been mistrustful of the Academy due to the way it treated Scorio and the way that it seems to be party to the erasure of memories in a way that feels very sus to me, and may not be their doing. It may be something that's an unavoidable side effect of reincarnation. But I have been very much they are fucked up. Scorio found out, whatever. I'm on Team Scorio, assuming that even though he maybe became somebody who was terrifying, that he was kind of in the right to this at the beginning, at least. And now I'm sort of is it that there is something that they left behind because it was long story short, what I'm saying is I'm starting to wonder if maybe the Academy was in the right and maybe just went around about things the wrong way. I'm still not fully trusting them, but there is a sense in the way that they get into it with her later on that feels very much to me like they truly believe they're doing the right thing. And doesn't have the ring of what's the word I want? Self-interest to it. It may be that they were lied to and they think they're doing the right thing because they don't know enough. But, you could do that forever. So anyway, all of that, I thought it was really kind of a question of whether or not they're using the old gauntlet somehow gave energy to the archspire. And maybe it was cut off and nobody used it anymore, but it couldn't actually be destroyed because the archspire is linked to the portal, as we find out, and the portal, they wanted it to be closed. And I have no idea what that means, how that would work, but maybe they stopped using it and built a new one because the portal had to remain closed and there was no way to keep using the gauntlet and ensure that was true. I don't know. So Dan says, awfully big coincidence for them to not have had something to do with it. And that's the thing. Scorio later is yeah, it is a coincidence, but they happen. And he seems to really mean it, but I'm just like, come on, man. That's not, you gotta know it's not. Like, that's just not likely to be this coincidence. Like, nobody's used this room for how long, and nothing happened. And now you use it, and within a week this happens. It really, you cannot think that that's not linked. Like, just be real with yourself here. So she says, the portal hasn't opened. Hope dies. What could be crueler? What greater torment? The shaft of light in the darkness. A final gasp. This is so... okay, I'm not even going to get into it yet. We're going to wait until a little bit later. So he's watching her from the sidelines and is seeing the mana in her palm. And he has a moment of just like, oh God, what is this? Like, she's pulling energy into her to a degree that Scorio is, how is she still alive? And he can feel it, almost as if she is pulling the air out of the room. She finally stops. 6 figures dropped down through the black cloud, shadows trailing after them as they sank into view, and Scorio felt his chest flutter with profound relief. 6 men, but 5 of which were all Pyre Lord Praximar, each independent of the others, their gazes taking in the entirety of the basilica, but always returning to the woman. His expression was universally one of intense concentration and concern. His 5 sets of pale blue eyes glimmered with focus as he came to a stop, fine clothing rippling as if he too floated in a powerful wind. The 6th man was brutish and stolid in comparison to the 5 reflections, bald and with a granite-like visage. His heavy hands were curled into fists, his chin lowered, his lipless mouth pressed into a tight seam. Scorio had seen him on the stage, the briefest glimpse, but his power and authority were obvious. He gazed at the woman with an inscrutable intensity of his own. "Imperator Imogen, you honor us," called out one of the Praximar reflections. "We had no warning that you intended a visit," continued another seamlessly, "or we would have prepared a lavish reception and banquet in your honor. It's been many long years since we've heard of your wondrous accomplishments. You would greatly honor Bastion and its every citizen great soul if you agreed to enjoy our hospitality. We wish nothing more than to hear of your exploits and to tend to your every need." The brutish man remained silent, a dour, powerful presence to the side. Imperator, thought Scorio, mind reeling. The absolute pinnacle of power. Yeah, that's bad news. That's a shame. So she turns and looks at them and says, very honestly, I thought the portal had started to open, and I got here all excited. And then I get here, and it's not open. And there's a moment where Praximar has, like, all of these, he goes through a cycle of expressions, and then he says, "We feel your grief, for every great soul lives in hope of seeing our grand what? Grandparents? Our grand land where we originated? What? I find myself wondering, doors can be opened from both sides. One need not wait to be invited. Are we not worthy? I am here, and I find that my desire has not wavered. Perhaps I shall knock. Perhaps I shall see if we are heard on the far side, and if no one attends." Praximar visibly paled. "Esteemed Imperator, I am thrilled at your suggestion, and wish to discuss it with you further. We can retire to the finest quarters that House Hydra can provide, and there discuss this at leisure." Imogen extended her palm toward the far wall, and a dark fog began to stream toward it from her hand. Silently, at a scale Scorio couldn't fathom, the entire side of the basilica's huge chamber began to change. And Praximar is just like, hey, what if you don't do that? What if you don't? How about no? And he has this look where Scorio can see he is in straight up panic mode. Imogen, of course, does not pay any attention. And the brutish man says, time to retreat. We can't handle this alone. And this is when Praximar looks around and sees Scorio and his friends, locks them into place, and they sort of take the place of the set of himselves, and they all get teleported. Oh boy. You guys, I was really surprised that they didn't just like immediately throw him behind the final door again. I really kind of wondered, but they have bigger fish to fry right now. So they fly, I'm sorry, I said teleported. I forgot the flight there. So it's not actually teleportation, but they are flying at a great speed. And they just basically get dumped onto the ground. Everybody is sort of car sick when they finally land. The only person in the small crowd that Scorio recognized was Helminth the Hell Whip, tall and athletic, garbed in training robes, and with her hands on her hips, eyes gleaming as she stared at him in shock. Scorio managed an apologetic smile before his attention was wrested to Praximar, who stepped before him and drove a finger into his chest. Why am I not surprised to find a red lister at the heart of this problem? You have seconds to explain what you've done, Scorio the Abhorred, before I destroy you utterly. And everybody, at first Scorio was like, oh, let me just retreat here, and then he sees how freaked out everybody clearly is. And he decides that he is going to come in on offensive and tell everybody what the fuck is going on. She said she was drawn to the old academy because of the archspire. She said she mistook it for the portal opening. And they're wondering, can we get another Imperator in here to help us? And Praximar says that it's not going to be quick. He says we can only hope they will sense the beacon and come quickly. Which I don't know what the beacon is, but they must have activated something. The brutish man says from the far side of hell, even if they dropped everything, it would take them days. Which, for a moment, I was like, oh, does she have an ability that made it faster for her? And then I remembered that she did something a little different to get here. I don't recall exactly how that worked. It's probably not that important. So yeah, okay, here it is. He says, assure me the beacon is lit. So yeah, they did something on their side. We need Desiree to arrive so she can craft the best plan for us. Last I heard, the White Queen was at the Fiery Shoals. She'll bring her retinue, which in turn should signal the others to attend. How did the Imperator seem to you? Deluded? A pane of glass so riven with cracks that one blow would cause her to irretrievably shatter? What did you think, Raug? Raug frowned. She was calm, pensive, determined, for now. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. Roger? Maybe it's Roger, like Roger, but like just said really weird. Like if you had a mouthful of peanut butter. So this is when Helminth is like, come over here. And I love this so much. She just like fucking puts all the twos and twos together and immediately knows what's going on. She's like, oh, okay, so you must have gotten out into the ruins, and I bet that's where you met Naomi, and she was probably the one training you, and you were a red lister, which I'm sure made it easier for her to trust you. And then you found them, the graveyards, and they decided to assist. Okay. And he's just like, Jesus, really? You just figured that out? Like, yeah. I mean, yeah, that makes sense to me. I love the fact that they don't have to explain I feel like that's a really nice shortcut on the behalf of the author. But then she's like, I don't get why you came back here, though. That's the problem. And this is the one they have like the talk of coincidence. A wild-haired man with a slender goatee sagged to one knee in their midst. Well, it looks like you were right, Lady Maeve. I might owe you an apology. A stately woman clothed in form-fitting black stepped forward, and her presence and command were such that even Praximar and Roger seemed diminished before her. Dark crimson hair fell in tangled locks of vivid flame past her shoulders, and her face was at once stern and sensitive, the freckles scattered across the bridge of her nose giving her a youthful look that was at odds with her self-possession and poise. Lady Maeve, thank Atera you're here. The situation is direr than I can neatly encapsulate. It is Imogen, then. She has returned? Unfortunately, I saw her with my own eyes. She stated her intent to open the portal. I tried to dissuade her, but my words fell on deaf ears. Greater powers than you have sought to reason with her and failed. Whom do we have available? So, then we meet Helena and Amity. And there was a moment where I got confused. Remind me what the names of the two women were that Scorio met in the ruins. Because I could have sworn one of them was Helena. And for a moment, I was like, wait a minute, was Helena a great soul? Like, in hiding? Is that, And clearly that's not what's going on here, but I definitely was... I thought that was her name, and I am absolutely... I know that there was one that was like... Phasia, something like that. I was so bad with their names. I don't know why it was like impossible for me to remember them. So meanwhile, Scorio and his friends like Naomi's like, maybe we should skedaddle so that they don't notice us. And Leon, she's like, you think they're not gonna notice you leaving? Get the fuck out of here. Of course we can't just turn around and walk out. And Leonis, personally, he's like, I don't think this is a coincidence. Come on. Why didn't you tell them about the gauntlet? And Scorio doesn't answer. He just says, we didn't summon her. And even if we did, even if our using the gauntlet caught her attention, we're not responsible for her. He paused, trying to find the right word. Madness, said Naomi. And I thought that was an interesting way to put it. It was Helena. Okay. One was a statuesque blonde, her physique powerfully muscled and leonine, the bridge of her nose kinked from an old break. Is that not her? Like, wasn't she described as like tall and blonde? And I feel like I'm making that up, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just whatever. But yeah, the idea that like, okay, maybe we did inadvertently summon her, but even if we did, like, she's bonkers and that is not our fault and we didn't intend anything by it. I actually can kind of see what he means. And I kind of wondered if like, perhaps I don't know, because obviously Scorio can feel that way in order to justify not telling them about the gauntlet. But I don't think that he should tell them about the gauntlet because God knows what they would do to these guys for using it. At the same time, if using the gauntlet is something that is this dangerous, maybe y'all should have done a little bit more to keep it from being used. Because the fact that they could step in there and use it at all, I mean, I don't know how predictable it was that something like this happened. Because I don't know if whatever they did to draw her attention is something that has happened before, that they would know to be on guard against it. I really don't, I don't know enough about what has happened. So I kind of liked I think it's fair to say that saying, well, we're not responsible for whatever she does is a rationalization to try and like duck responsibility. But also it's not entirely untrue. And like I said, if this was going to be such a huge risk, it was the responsibility of the people who knew it was a risk to keep it from happening, not the responsibility of people who were never told anything about it and perhaps were being actually lied to not do what they did. So this is when the White Queen comes through. Super blonde, super pale blue eyes, super pale skin, very much looking like a snowflake. So everybody fucking kneels in front of her. And she speaks to Lady Maeve and is like, so we're not too late. She's returned alone. No sign of Zelaire or Jornvin. None, praise the 10 hells, said Lady Maeve. Then while we yet breathe, there is hope. Maeve, it's good to see you again. Charnel Duchess, with you here, we have a chance. So this is when some guy says she didn't come alone. And he steps forward. He's older. He has a bald head and white beard and jacked body with tattoos all over him. I keep imagining the look of oh my God, what is his name? Jeff Bridges' character in the first Iron Man movie. That's who I picture in my head. Just like jacked all to hell. His name is Grunch, which I really take issue with. I'm just going to say this. I'm not going to dwell on it. But that name feels so, it's just undignified. Every time the narrator says it, it brings me up short. It really feels funny. But he seems kind of delightful. I can't tell you guys what like a soft touch I am for this type of character. You bring in a jacked cinnamon roll type, and I am absolute putty. Again, I know I've said that already this episode, but truly, it is just my entire bag, I'm into it. That's all I'm saying. He sounds like a zaddy. And the fact that he is also like jokey guy, y'all know that is just a complete kryptonite for me. Anybody who is like the cheery, funny one, forget it. Forget it. Combine it with being jacked and bald-headed with a beard like my husband. Thumbs up. So anyway, what I'm saying is I would like to bang Grunch. And I don't like saying I would like to bang Grunch. I don't want to say those words together. I don't like them. Okay. So this is when they have this woman Desiree come in who has like a power for being able to plan things, which is amazing. She has this inference ability. I absolutely... What she has is anxiety if it were a superpower. Like planning ahead because she's just thinking in terms of trying to predict every possible outcome like somebody with bad anxiety like myself. And seeing it being used like this does somehow make me feel a little bit better. There's something about it that I'm like, ooh, goals. But yeah, she says we have to delay her. There is no way we can actually beat her in combat, but we can fucking distract her to a point that we get like draw things out enough for other people to come and help that are going to take a while to get here. As long as she's not able to focus and do what it is that she's trying to do, we're fine. It's annoying, but so that's the best they're going to do. And the White Queen talks about what her abilities are. Her powers are limited by her cloud of darkness, but given her ability to direct her fog where she wills, it is a slight restriction. Her powers are varied. She can hurl beams of destructive darkness, control the minds of those who stray into her fog, rearrange the terrain as she sees fit, and travel through the fog at will. And Scorio is just like, oh, Jesus Christ, like off to the side, just, what do we even do then? And I gotta agree. That's like, there are times where you tell me what somebody's weaknesses are, and I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe this, and this. And then there are times where I'm so overwhelmed by the implications of that I just shut down. And I'm like, well, I guess we're dead. So those are merely the abilities she manifested by the time she became a Dreadblaze. Her mastery over all forms of mana is nearly total. Her halo allows her to establish preeminence, which none here can contest. Her ferula, I think that's how you say that. I feel like I hit this word before. This is the plant that I had looked up. I don't remember if I'm saying it correctly, but her ferula is infamous for its destructive power, and her shroud is nigh impervious to any attacks we can muster. As an imperator, she can summon legions of servants from her private realm, though I doubt we can press her hard enough to force her to do so. That was absolutely chilling for me. She has this bonkers ability that is going to make you shake in your shoes to hear that she has literal armies in a secret pocket world. But she is so fucking OP that we won't even get to that because she will crush us before we ever need to bother. Like, that fucked with my head. I was just, that is too much. That's just too much power, man. Woof. Anyway. So I am running out of time here, and I don't feel like I need to go over everybody's position, what they're assigned to do, and what their abilities are. It suffice to say, Scorio and company are left without any job because they are pitiful, sad little creatures who can do nothing. And Naomi is very much like, let's get the fuck out of here. But Leonis and Scorio are both like, we have got to do something to help. Like, we can't just, we're great souls. We may not have the abilities they do, but we can't just fucking run and hide. And, I appreciate it because Naomi says your ego is astounding. Haven't you grasped the scale at which this battle is being fought? Which really is such a perfect character thing because that's like low-key how she has been living. It's so big that there's no point. Why bother? It's too much. There's no overcoming it. And so she just gives up. And the whole thing that binds Leonis, Scorio, and Lianshi is the fact that they don't think or act that way. And it's really hard for Lianshi to, like, come over to their side of things because while it is a more hopeful way to live and there's a lot of, like, plus sides to it, and she needs that kind of attitude in her life, there's no getting past when you are this cynical, a feeling that everybody around you is being, like, a fucking starry-eyed hayseed who doesn't know any better. Like, they just feel really naive. And you've got to sort of let yourself be okay with that. And that requires a kind of trust and faith that because you are a cynic, it can be very hard to come by. So she keeps arguing with them until Scorio just hits her with some fucking logic and says, if they lose, there won't be any city left. So what are you going to do? Hide out in the ruins when everybody's fucking dead? And when he puts it to her like that, she's just got nothing to say and is just like, all right, fine. So they decide that they are going to try and help with the distraction effort. Scorio says something like, maybe we can fuck with the Archspire somehow. And she's like, doesn't that seem like a real bad idea? But they don't really have like another, They run across the Toad, and Scorio yells for him to get below because he's not safe, and he immediately obeys him. Good going, Eugene. And then we see a bunch of these attacks that are just hitting her, and she is not feeling it. At one point, Scorio's like, did she even notice that? Because somebody gets thrown back, and it's like this automatic response from her shield power, I think. But it's like, this person has just been slammed into a wall, and she isn't even aware that she did that. Because it was nothing. It was like crushing somebody that you're walking on without seeing them. So I'm trying to see what's a good spot for us to start talking about it all again, because like, oh my God, you guys, I forgot about this. Fucking Naomi turns into her nightmare form. And it is so great. Leonis just says, damn. And she looks at him and says, problem? And he says, no problem. You just look intimidating. And Leonshi says, fantastic. Absolutely amazing. I love it. You do? Scorio had never seen the Nightmare Lady so flummoxed. Yes! You look lethal and strong and just, I don't know, everything I want to be one day. Oh. Her tail drooped and then rose again. Well, that just means you're weird. I couldn't get enough of this whole thing. There was a point that I had forgotten to touch on last episode, I think. And she describes herself as elegantly lethal. And Scorio sort of like catches that and says it back to her with a little bit of an eyebrow raise. And she seems to get a little embarrassed about it. And it made me wonder if that thought about herself is what made her take this form, if that's part of like, and she's embarrassed to have thought those words about herself because there's something that's sort of self-aggrandizing. But the fact that Leonshi reacted the way that she did to her form, I really love the fact that like she is having this sort of moment of like somebody else is into this, so maybe it's not an inherently bad thing, because it seems like she manifested a look that almost made her feel like there's something wrong with her. And the fact that Leonshi likes it, her responding with that just means you're weird makes sense, because she can't accept that maybe I'm not wrong. Maybe there's nothing wrong with me. And this is actually just a dope ass look. She instantly jumps to, oh, well then you're just also fucked up. Which that's how we work a lot of the time. You know, when somebody's trying to tell us something that we don't agree with about ourselves, a lot of times we'll just be like, oh, well, that's just because you don't know me that well and I'm tricking you. I'm very good at making people think I'm competent and nice and whatever. But if you knew me better, you'd realize I am not. So, gotcha. So at this point, I got to run into the conversation that occurs between Imogen and what seems to be, I'm going to call him like her ex-husband, even though I don't think that that's accurate at all. But suffice to say, lots more fighting, lots more attempts to distract. And Scorio is trying all of these things, but I just cannot get into it, and I really think it's okay that I don't fully get into it. Here it is. Now Amity, said Nova, placing her hand on his shoulder. The older man nodded grimly, threw his head back, and his whole body clenched, tendons standing out in his neck. The White Queen, Lady Maeve, and Grunch all screamed at once. The Blood Barons ceased their attacks on Imogen, and the three of them crumpled, falling to the ground as their flesh withered and their skin grayed, each of them aged to the ultimate reaches of what a human body could bear. What? That is wild. Was that... Did we? No, said Grunch, but it was a good shot. Scorio couldn't tell what he did, but the rocks at the far end of the basilica that had buried Imogen suddenly crunched down, compacting as if under a huge weight. Again, they continue with this. And talking about maybe we can imprison her. Perhaps this is going to work. I love that there's a moment where Scorio is just like, I cannot believe being amongst these people. Like, they can do shit that is so beyond anything in my imagination. I have got to get here. I've got to be able to, like, be equals with these people. And it's just funny to me that in the midst of that, like, this is what he's thinking, you know? So this is when the black smoke begins to come down. And where is it? Okay. They jump into the gauntlet to escape. So he thinks. He wakes up. He's the only one in the gauntlet. So they hadn't gotten through in time, which fucking blows. And he goes up to so I'm just going to jump to the fact that he kills himself quickly by cutting his, like, neck on one of the blades in such a way that he can wake up having been injured in a way that isn't absolutely debilitating to him. He'll wake up in pain, of course, but it's not like when he got crushed by all those rocks and he was just, like, unable to move for a minute. So that's the way that he manages to, like, manifest himself back onto the beer. And he's looking around at everybody who has sort of frozen in place from this fog. And he says, they tried to kill me, the great souls of Bastion. They wanted me dead. So what he decides is to reach out to her on the level of, like, they're against me too. I'm not on their side, which by default means that I'm kind of on your side. At first, she's not very impressed and is just like, well, what the fuck do I care? You're a cinder. And then he says something, and I thought this was very interesting. I thought I might in some small way provide an audience to see the greatness you are about to accomplish and be sure that it's never forgotten. And she says, you would witness my deeds? Wait. I know you. And it makes me think he must have said something like this before in his previous life. Like, there was something about that sentence that seemed to get her attention. So that must be the kind of, like, argument that he has made in other lives, which is just wild to think. And she's like, wow, you are not what you used to be, though. What a bummer. And she says, such are the cruelties of hell. Too many to count, said Scorio. You may witness my final act as an imperator. And she turned back to the archspire. So he's watching her, and he doesn't really have a plan here. She hasn't killed him, so that's great. But he doesn't know what else he can do exactly. And she says, I lied before. It occurs to me now, you've been a constant companion for some time now in my labyrinth. And she says, you and the others, Aranon, the milliner, Faris, the Yvette twins, watching me always as I sought, and keeping me company in the dark, sympathetic, I thought, caring. Two-faced, of course, but that shallow duplicity was in and of itself almost endearing. And I don't know what to make of this. Like, was he really there? Is this something that she's being haunted by? Did she kill him at one point? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what to think of this. So she freezes just as she's about to do something. And there is a, let's see, here it is. She flung out her hand and he shut his mouth. He's here, she whispered. He's actually come. That's good. Who is here? She blinked and turned to regard him with a warm smile. My husband. I'm going to say ex-husband because of reasons. So this dude comes down through the ceiling, and he has got long blonde hair with a beard slightly darker, tan cheeks, perhaps in his 40s, with the physique of a man half his years. And he says, you must stop. And she is so delighted to see him, but he does not respond in kind, and it clearly bums her out. He keeps telling her, you can't undo the world. And she's like, of course I can. Yeah. And then once that's done, she says, after all we've done, after all we've sacrificed, why should we not demand an accounting? Because the portal cannot be opened from this side. You know this, or did once. She slashed angrily at the air. Accepted truths passed down to us by whom? Why not verify them, now at the peak of our strength? Because I will not be party to genocide. Genocide? You mean slavery? Others live in Bastion, innocents, tens of thousands of them. Are they talking about the great souls? Are they slaves? Is that what she's saying? I will agree on one condition. His response was calm and utterly final. No. You would refuse even if it meant genocide and the destruction of Bastion? I will not return to you, Imogen. Things cannot be as they were. Then you countenance this, she said, voice raw with anger. This is on your head, Saul. No. He extended his hand to the side, and a golden spear materialized in his palm. There will be no genocide or destruction, for I shall not allow it. So you would raise your hand against me at last. Her smile was raw, but did nothing to hide the pain in her eyes. Perhaps I should have done so before. Perhaps that was my greatest failing, to have allowed my love to blind me all these years. There is nothing we cannot fix together. There is no returning from what you did. But we need not fight. Agree to leave Bastion peacefully with me. We can negotiate terms. We can find a way toward peace. And be without you forever, my love. You guys, this is actually really upsetting. This really bummed me out. He multiplies himself and is like in a sort of sphere ringing her. And he says, I ask one last time, don't. And she says, I love you. Since I first saw you on our gauntlet run, always and deeply and truly, I've always loved you, Saul, in every life, and I always will. Don't, croaked Saul. Imogen flared her fingers wide, then thrust her hand full upon the spire. And that is the end of chapter 41. That's where I had to stop. Which is for the best, because I went over time as it is. But I very much want to know what happened, and I am dying over here. And I feel really bad for her poor, heartbroken brain. This girl. She a mess, yo. Crazy ex-girlfriend. All right, guys. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me. I have got to wrap. Thank you, Dan, for commissioning this. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.